Hello, everybody, and you're very welcome to October's Poesia do Meio Dia. I'm very happy to be here again. And I would just like to start by saying that this month I'm going to introduce you to a few of our contemporary female poets who are blazing a trail in Ireland at the moment. We have no shortage of amazing female writers. And a lot of these female writers are unafraid to choose difficult themes to write about, and they're moving away from the lyric, which was very much part of Irish poetry in the past, and towards a freer verse, longer lines. So today I'm going to address the kind of complexity of the emotions and the themes that Irish women are talking about in their poetry these days. And again, I've noticed that some of the poems I've picked, the theme of the situations and how we interact with them, and these situations, how the past really comes into bear in the future, and even the present and our actions are so intertwined with how our future comes into being. But before we start off, I'm going to bring you our old faithful Yeats, as this is the chair of the Yeats. So I'm starting with one of his older poems, a very early poem written when he started quite early in his career, When You Are Old. I chose this poem because I like that idea again of the choices that we make now are they have such a big impact on what happens in our future, and indeed on the future of those around us. And I guess Yeats is saying in this poem that no matter what choice we make, we will have our regrets in the future. But I guess those are our own regrets, the ones that we own. Maybe they're not the regrets other people thought that we would have. Anyway, when you are old. When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace and loved your beauty with love false or true? But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. My next poet is a poet very well known in Ireland, Doireann Ní Ghríofa. She's a bilingual writer. She writes in the Irish language and then translates her own work into English. But all her poetry is really devoted into exploring how the past makes itself felt within the present. She's multi-award winning, and she's had a huge success recently with a book entitled A Ghost in the Throat. And that's sort of a poetic exploration of inner life and the deep connection felt between two writers, one in the past and one in the present. Now, this poem that I'm going to read for you today is called Curragh. And a curragh is a type of boat with a wooden frame, which has got stretched animal skins or hide. And it's a traditional rowing boat, mostly found in the west of Ireland. And Of course, the style of the curragh varies with the region in which it's made. But the people who went out fishing in these boats of old, they had a terrible, what we call pishrogue, an old wives' tale, a fear of learning to swim. Fishermen in those days never learned to swim. They thought that it was unlucky for a fisherman to be able to swim. And this poem by Thurin portrays this feeling very, very well and very intensely. Curragh by Thurin ní Gríofra. He knew, even as a boy in his father's curragh, he knew that the sea would someday grasp him in her terrible teeth, destroy him, drown him in her salted grief, her embrace wet and wide as the slow dawn of death in the eye of a fish. He knew it as he built the curragh, as he curved each slender rib of wood and covered it in canvas as bleak and as black as a mourning gown over slender shoulders. He knew that someday it would buck like a colt and hurl him into the dark water. He knew, even as he married me, loved and laughed and poured a baby into me, he knew. He knew as the surged through sea swell, seeking to fill his nets with silver. He knew, and still he refused to learn to swim. For the struggle against his lot could only prolong his agonies. He knew our lives together could never be long, that by the time our child was born, he would be long gone. He knew. The second poet that I've chosen to bring to you today is a lady called Siobhan Campbell, and she's the author of 6 books of poetry. And her poem that I'm going to read to you today, When All This Is Over, was chosen as part of the In Dreams Begin Responsibilities performance, which was a performance in Belfast to commemorate and celebrate the signing of the historic Good Friday Agreement. And that was an agreement between the British and Irish governments and most of the political parties in Northern Ireland on how Northern Ireland should be governed. And indeed, it brought a great peace to Northern Ireland. The poem tries to look forward, but it doesn't forget about what we are looking forward from. Very interesting poem. When All This Is Over by Siobhan Campbell. I plan to go north by unapproved roads where sniper signs rust on the trees. I will cross the border over and back several times to see how it feels. I will dance the Pig's Dyke and taste mountain mayflower on the breeze. Near underfished lakes, I will hear a blood pause in the reach of the night, when every word used for batter and crisis will cruise with the ease of what runs right through us. When the shift and fill of my own dear cells is all they will tell as they breathe. And out through the lanes, I will lie in my form in overgrown fields. Not a chopper in sight. and they say it is safe, and the weather agrees. The next poet I would like to introduce is Anne-Marie Ní Chomhairle. She's a poet from the Donegal Gaeltacht. Her debut collection is a collection called Bloodroot, and it's dedicated to the women in her family whom she feels their voices were not always heard. Her second book of poetry was just published in 2021, called The Poison Glen. She has a very interesting life, as she was the eldest of a large family that fostered many, many children for short and long periods of time. And so she grew up in this house of many different children coming and going. And she says herself that she has this sort of been left with this keen sense of the fact that most things in life are temporary because of this experience. And she calls this lovely poem Sisters. Sisters by Anne-Marie Ní Chomhairle. Let it be said, I cut a nick in my own skin, and by a spit became blooded to them all. Maeve, swaddled in clean cloth like a gem, as her mother, aged 16, leaned against the kitchen counter and watched me hold. Bríd and Marie, found in a trailer by the river, speaking in a twisted song. Emer, who was always going home. Niamh, who I was wild for and who was wild for me, but who held me under in the pool until both of us were dragged out of the water sobbing. Dara, who pulled her shirt up to reveal a string of roses on her ribs. Here are the gifts of my father, she said. Grace, who could fix any error with a piece of purple gum. Sarah, pure as water, bold as fire. I can still see her tear across the hill on that guy's motorbike, high-headed and ready for battle. Tailed women, denim stealers, alley girls in white musk with 9 lives. These were my sisters. We argued over top bunks. We bled on sheets. We were 4 in a room the winter the house was falling down. We wrote letters to the man on the radio. We scanned the news for names of the dead. We curled letters inside bottles and threw them out to the sea. We snapped wishbones, swore on graves, buried our treasure. We swung the gold of our mothers over our palms 3 times and asked the air, will I be loved? Yes? No? Yes? No? Yes? No? Another Irish poet writing at the moment in Ireland is a lady called Jane Clark. And she had her first collection published in 2015, which to huge public and critical acclaim. And her second book was published around 2019, which is an illustrated book of poems. And I really like this poem because it invokes in me memories of sitting on the stairs as a child, sometimes hearing my mom and dad argue, sometimes hearing my mom chat with a friend in the kitchen, sometimes trying to hear what was on the television. That's sitting on the stairs as a kid by yourself or with a brother or sister. And this in this poem as well, the girl is sitting on the stairs, unfortunately, listening to her father and mother have a bad argument. And then we see the brother and sister in the future with this man who seemed to have argued so vehemently in his youth, now needing help and support from these grown-up children. Again, the past and the future converging. He stood at the top of the stairs, by Jane Clark. He stood at the top of the stairs, insisting he could go down himself, but like a frightened bullock, refusing the crush, his body wouldn't move from the spot where I used to sit in the dark, listening to rows in the kitchen when my mother showed him the bill from the shop. He stood at the top of the stairs in a fever that came on him as fast as nightfall in winter, steep, narrow steps between him and the ambulance ticking outside the back door. He stood there in checked pajamas and thick Wellington socks in the house where he was born and had sworn he would never leave. I held him from behind, my brother in front, coaxing with a tenderness I'd never seen between them. Come on, Dad, come on, just one step, one step. Another poet, Anne Panham, her poetry really chronicles love and loss and our daily struggles with both. She's a Dublin poet, and her first collection was published in 2011. And I think she's got 2 other collections now. Yes, her third one being published in 2021. This poem is called Feral, and she wrote it for a friend of hers who had an addiction with alcohol and big struggles with alcohol. So I'll just read it. Feral for Tea by Anne Panham. I remember reading a story once set in Victorian England about a gentleman whose young wife, in an unexplained miracle of the very worst kind, gradually turns into a fox. And here you are, sitting in our kitchen at 1:45 in the morning, dressed in someone else's coat, smelling of neglect and nights without the comfort of sleep. Are you well? Such a useless question when thirst is slowly unraveling summer from your skin, your hair, your eyes, from the corners of your mouth. We offer you the couch, but you are racing across fields, winter's cold breath pounding in your ears. My last poem today is written by a very young poet, Jess McKinney. She has just published one pamphlet of poetry called Weeding. She's a feminist poet, a graduate of UCD in Dublin, and from Donegal. But she writes a lot about memory, nature, relationships, gender, mental health, independence, sexuality, all these very current themes. And her poetry is being greeted with great acclaim in Ireland, and indeed she has been, she is regarded as one of the top 10 emerging poets in Ireland at the moment. And this poem, called Melancholy, is a poem about all mixing up all our feelings, not just within ourselves, but as a world, as ourselves, as part of the greater, I suppose, body of people. Melancholy by Jessica McKinney. Are we but drops of personality in a universe of emotion? All different ingredients of different origins, different flavors, but all together make one unique recipe, one ingredient. Without the other, and the dish is melancholy. The mixtures simmer together, enforcing the outcome that's needed, craved. Are we all but simple ingredients to our ancestors' dish, combined in different forms, adjusted to taste, perfected? When will our taste be right? Generations of combining, decades of tasting, centuries of improvement. When will we be safe for consumption? We lay the bricks to follow. We read our ancestors' cookbooks. But what we add, that ingredient, to bring all these diverse emotions together. The piece of music I've chosen to leave you with today, it's a very powerful and beautiful and uplifting song, even though it's written about loss and suicide. It's performed by an Irish group called Lancome, and although it's very mournful at times, it's ultimately a reminder to us all to cherish and to love and to appreciate our friends and our family and our loved ones while we still can. Today, so many of us our lives have been touched, or we've had direct involvement in this most sad, especially this most sad fact that thwarts our society today, that of young people taking their own lives. But I hope to leave you with the hope that while we have today around us our friends and our loved ones, that we do remember to appreciate and cherish them. I hope you enjoy it. This piece of music, it's beautiful, and this is a wonderful group called Lancome, which is taking old Irish music and a lot of the songs and transforming them in their own unique way. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and we'll play out with our usual ending music. I hope you enjoyed my selection today.